I, 36 male, and my wife, 31 female, were married for 6 years before I learned something heartbreaking that destroyed our marriage. Before we got married, my wife and I were very good friends, and our relationship was strong because the organizations we worked for were on the same street and we used to see each other all the time. But because I was always searching for greener pastures, I had to move to a different state where I still live. After I traveled to resume my new job, aside from my best friend and family, my wife was the only person that always called to check on me, and we talk on the phone the whole evening or chat with each other throughout the day. It felt great to know someone out there cared about me, and in no time, I caught feelings for her. After months of being apart, I asked her out, and since she was also single, she said yes, and that's how our love story began. Even though our relationship was more of a long distance one, I still felt loved and trusted her so much. On my end, I tried to communicate with her as much as possible, and we took turns visiting each other on weekends or whenever we were free. After 2 years of our long distance relationship, we got married, and she was forced to relocate and live in my state. Luckily, she got a job in her field, and the pay was great. She was also very passionate about her career, and she quickly climbed the ladder in her organization. It had to do with the extra professional certifications she got and her years of expertise. Marriage-wise, our relationship was great, and we were both happy, me especially. I loved her so much and did not imagine being with any other woman except her, and I believed we would grow old together. Initially, before we got married, we agreed we would not have kids yet because I didn't think I was ready to be a father, but after 1 year of marriage, I changed my mind. We talked about it again, and she was eager to stop taking her birth control pills, and fortunately for us, after a couple of months, she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy. The birth of our son came with an extra dose of happiness, and he even motivated me to work harder so I could take care of him. I even took an additional online job as a freelancer to earn some extra bucks. On the other hand, my wife did not need an additional job since taking care of our child was already working on its own, and I encouraged her to work very little and rest more, and I would take care of the rest. Eventually, after our son was almost a year old, she resumed work, and everything continued the way it was. The only difference in our lives was our son. Some months after my wife resumed work, I noticed she started dressing differently, which was unlike her. Before our son came, she never really cared about what she wore, and would literally wear anything as long as colors were right. But after she resumed work, everything changed. The thing is, I did not have a problem with her dressing differently and being conscious of what she wore. I was more concerned with how the dresses made her look. For someone who has recently given birth, her stomach was visible through her tight clothes, but she didn't mind. She would even go as far as wearing blouses that would expose her boobs and something a little bit under her hips. I complained about her new choice of clothes and told her I wasn't comfortable with them, but her response was always, "I'm not wearing them for you. I'm wearing them for me," and she would leave the house in anger. It got so bad that we started fighting about it, until I finally found out she decided to change her wardrobe because of how she felt in her skin. Indeed, her body had changed, and she added a lot of pounds because of her pregnancy, and according to her, she wanted to look and feel younger, so she started dressing differently. Honestly, I felt terrible that I had been bugging her to stop dressing like a call girl, and I apologized and never mentioned it again. Meanwhile, our son was always with my wife, and we enrolled him at a daycare, where my wife would drop him off in the morning before going to work, and I would pick him up by 3 p.m. every day. One day, I was supposed to go and pick him up as usual, but something came up at the office and I couldn't leave. So I tried calling my wife multiple times to inform her about the change of plans, but she wasn't responding. It was even some minutes past 3, and I didn't want her to think I had gone to get her son when I didn't. After waiting to see if she would return any of my calls, and she didn't, I called her organization to try and get in contact with her, but to my greatest surprise, I was told she no longer worked there, and she was sacked a few months earlier for sleeping with an intern. At first, I looked at my phone screen to be sure I called the right organization, and it was. It didn't make sense because my wife left home by 7:30 every morning, and most times, she would return late in the evening because she claimed she did overtime. I was so shocked that I lost focus for a couple of minutes before responding to the person on the phone. I ended up asking a colleague of mine to cover for me, and I went to take our son home. When I got home that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what I found out. To even show how good she was at pretending, she would come home and still pretend to work on her laptop so I wouldn't suspect anything. So, eventually, she returned home that evening and talked about her day at work and all the things that happened. They were all lies, and I kept my cool, played along, and pretended like I didn't know she had been fooling me. That same day, before I returned home, I stopped by a store and grabbed one of those mini trackers because I was curious to know where she went every morning and returned late in the evening. The following morning, when I put our son in the back seat of her car, I secretly placed the tracker and kissed her goodbye. Immediately, she left the house. I started tracking her. As expected, she stopped first at our son's daycare, and from there, she went somewhere else, definitely not her workplace. She stayed there for several hours, went out, and returned to the same house. I tracked her for a whole week, and it was the same pattern until I decided to pay her a surprise visit one day. That day, she left the house as usual and even informed me she would be returning late because there was an important project her teen was working on. I called in sick at work already because I knew I would be showing up to her lover's house. Meanwhile, I had stopped by the house before to know the exact apartment she was going to, and I knew what her lover looked like. He was younger and opened the door to welcome her whenever she went there. When I arrived, I knocked on the door, pretending to be a pizza delivery guy. At first, I feared they wouldn't open the door because they didn't order pizza, but I was just dumb luck. Immediately, the young boy she was having an affair with opened the door. I pushed my way inside, and at the same time, my wife walked in on us naked, and she froze. I was already prepared, so I was doing a Facebook Live video, and I recorded myself from the moment I left my car until I entered her lover's house. When she realized I was recording her, she tried to cover her face and run back inside, but she slipped and fell, resulting from her coming out of the bathroom. I know it is cruel, but I used the opportunity to record her well and say everything I wanted. It would be an understatement if I said I was only heartbroken. She literally destroyed everything we shared, planned, and even our son's life. That day, she didn't bother coming home because I warned her not to. I packed her things on her front porch, but she only came to take them a week later. As for revenge, I tagged most of her family members and friends on the live video I made, and she was so embarrassed. The comments were crazy too, and I'm sure she read all of them. Funny enough, she never tried to beg me or explain. She knew it was over between us, which was very smart of her. She was smart enough not to bring her infidelity into her house, or else she and her lover would probably be limping for life. Anyways, we divorced, and with the help of a good lawyer, I won custody of our son. She left town when she could no longer bear the embarrassment from our townspeople, neighbors, friends, church members, and others who recognized her from the viral live video. Right now, I am the only parent our son has and looks up to, and I'm confident he's my son because I did a paternity test. As for love, I will be taking a very long break for now, and I'd rather focus all my energy on raising my boy properly and giving him a good life. OP, your wife lied to you. She wasn't wearing all those exposing clothes for herself. She was wearing them for her lover. I'm sorry this happened to you, and from your story, it is obvious you are a good man and husband. But she was too short-sighted to see that and appreciate you. I'm glad you ended things with her, and she's out of your life for good. Please take care of yourself and your son. Meanwhile, that was a smart move in taking that paternity test. I wish more men with cheating spouses would do the same thing. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and I wish you the best going forward. Now, let's move on to the next story. Here is my story. Andrea and I met at a mutual friend's wedding. We were paired to do the groomsmen and the bridesmaid couple dance and exchanged contact after that. As time passed, we became close friends, followed each other on social media, commented on each other's pictures, and started hanging out from there. About 4 months after we met, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and shortly after that, she moved in with me. I know you will all be mad that I asked Andrea to move in with me after 6 weeks of dating, but I did that because I was madly in love with her and wanted to wake up next to her every morning. She was a nice person and great company, at least for the time we were still together, and I enjoyed being around her. She was intelligent and funny, and I loved her sense of humor the most. I worked as a real estate consultant while she worked remotely. She was a web developer, and most of her jobs were done from home, except when she wanted a location change. We dated for 2 years, and at one time, I thought we would break up. Although this isn't the main part of what happened between us, it all adds up. During the first year of our relationship, there was a time she suddenly started acting cold toward me, and we no longer bonded like we used to. Before her change in attitude started, we used to cook together, talk about my day at work, and she would talk about how easy or challenging her work was that day too. But suddenly I noticed she changed and would focus more on her phone and leave me to stay or watch television alone. Eventually, I found out she was flirting with someone online, and they were planning to meet the following week. I was so mad that she was flirting with some guy she met on Facebook, and they planned to hang out together the following week. Their chats were provocative, and the most annoying part was that she didn't tell him she was in a relationship or try to stop him from flirting with her. It was almost like she enjoyed it. When I confronted her about it, she apologized and said they were only playing around, and it was nothing serious. She blocked him to prove to me that there was nothing serious between them, and promised it would never happen again. Now that I think about it, that should have been a red flag for me. Although flirting with someone online is not enough reason to quit a relationship, I should have ended things with her because no one knows what level their flirting would have escalated to if I did not find out. Well, a year after that happened, we married. We never had issues of her flirting with anyone again, and I never found anything suspicious on her phone on the days I would unexpectedly ask to go through her phone. We were married for 2 years and didn't have any children because we didn't want any. Meanwhile, there was this very close friend of mine who was like a family friend, and his wife and Andrea were very good friends too. We had this small group of friends, for married couples and two single men. We didn't exactly form, but we were always hanging out as a group and supported one another in good and bad times. Aside from family, they were my support system, and if one of us was going through a tough time, say financial problems, we would all help out in any way we could, even if it meant contributing some money. When things were good, we would all dine and celebrate together. One day, I had recently sold a very expensive house to a client that had been giving me a tough time, and I had already told my friends that if a contract clicked, I would throw a small party to celebrate the milestone, and that's exactly what I did. The party was meant to only be for the members of our friendship group, but I added 3 more people, making us a total of 13 people, minus their kids. During the party, I realized my phone battery was already low, so I went to our bedroom to get my charger, or probably charge my phone there. But somehow, I got distracted by a short funny video one of our friends dropped on our group chat. Coincidentally, immediately after the video stopped playing, I heard my wife giggle and talk in a hushed tone with a man. They didn't know I was in our bedroom, and the door was partially open, so they stopped to kiss briefly before entering the kitchen, and I was so shocked. I didn't actually see them kiss, but I knew they did because of the sound I heard. I was so heartbroken, and I could not believe Andrea was cheating on me after all the promises she made. It wasn't just her cheating that hurt. She cheated on me with my closest friend in our group. The funny thing was that his wife was in the living room with their 2 daughters, completely ignorant of what was happening. I was so boiled up and thought of confronting them, but I knew it would only make things worse, primarily because of how angry I was. So, I went to the kitchen, but before I entered, I announced my presence with a mild cough, so they could have enough time to pretend nothing was going on between them. I talked to them briefly, grabbed a bottle of water, and left. But before I did, I turned on the voice recorder on my phone and left it in a very natural position, so that they wouldn't suspect anything was fishy, even if they saw it. Shortly after they left the kitchen, I took it and listened to everything they said. They were planning to hang out that night, and my wife already devised the perfect plan to get rid of me. Hearing that even broke me more, so I devised a plan. Before that time, I had learned a couple of audio editing hacks, so I edited the audio and highlighted the part they talked about their affair and how they would get rid of us in no time. By that, they meant Andrea divorcing me, and her affair partner would divorce his wife. Later that night, I allowed her to proceed with her plan and pretended I didn't know anything. I had been heartbroken twice in the past, so my heart was already used to that kind of pain. The following day, I anonymously sent the audio to all our friends' email addresses, including her affair partner and his wife, and waited for everyone to react. First, they were shocked at what they had heard and could not believe it. I knew they had listened to the audio when one of them called and asked if I had gotten any audio from an anonymous email, and when I said no, he forwarded it to me. I pretended to be shocked and used the opportunity to confront Andrea. Honestly, I thought she would deny it and act innocent, but she started crying and begging me. She said she cheated on me because she wanted options, and she felt she was stuck with me and kind of felt suffocated. Then she begged me to forgive her and not let her infidelity ruin the future we were building. The audacity. Concerning her talk of wanting to have options, I was shocked to hear that because Andrea was the same person who told me she was a one-man woman, and she never cheated on her spouse and would never do that. So, it was all surprising to hear that she wanted options. I know I acted tough on the outside, but I was so hurt deep inside. I loved her so much and wanted what we had to work. Ultimately, I divorced her so she could go and be with her lover. I was thinking her lover's wife would divorce her husband, but she didn't. Somehow he managed to convince her that he was framed, and she believed him. How stupid of her. They even cut ties with our group and insulted everyone for not standing by them. As for Andrea, she had no place with us anymore, and she cut ties with our social circle too. Everyone was so disappointed when Andrea admitted their affair started 6 months after our wedding, and they had been fooling everyone, including me. Her reputation was ruined too, and she could no longer get favors and support. It's only been 9 months, and I figured putting this here would help me heal faster and relieve my burden. Honestly, that was all that was left of my heart, and I can't guarantee I will fully love any other woman I meet. I have been badly hurt, and it has changed everything about me. OP, you shouldn't let your broken relationship with your wife dictate how the rest of your life will go. It's a good thing you have a support group, and I'm glad they stood by you. Don't let the past steal your future joy, love, and happiness. It might be challenging, but I know you will be able to fully recover from this one day and not let it phase you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or some